Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Brown. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about a course that I'm going to be running in the next few months called The Ancient and Modern Clinical Application of Acupuncture, the Lung and Large Intestine Channels and Points. Now, this course was largely influenced by a book uh, called Li Zhen, not to be confused with the herbalist, but he was an acupuncturist of the 20th century. And he wrote a very, very famous book where he selected certain points to discuss that he thought were the most important clinically. And I read that book and I really enjoyed it. And I thought that we can bring some of this information with other information or other sources to the West. This course will be run through the Academy of Source Based Medicine. So, first off, when we learn acupuncture, how do we learn it? Are we just do we start off by learning the points, the channels, that tends to what we get taught mostly in our classes. But then what about prescriptions, treatments, and diseases? Do we spend much time looking at those? Do we ever look at any classical texts? Do we look at any famous acupuncturists or Lao Zhongyi, famous old Chinese doctors? Do we look at how they treated diseases, how they prescribed acupuncture points, what points they combined with? What diseases did they use those points to treat with? To me, a lot of this information is missing in our uh, current acupuncture education. So I thought about how could we develop a course that might help fill this void and really bring the best information from not just the 20th century acupuncturists, but from really the beginning, starting out from the Neijing and the systematic classic, the kind of Han Dynasty, and even though the systematic classic was written after, well, compiled after, I think people would argue that the parts of it were written during the Han Dynasty from the Ming Tang. But how do we we start with these ideas and these points, and even going through then from the early Song Dynasty text, looking at some of those like the supplementing life, looking at some of the Ming Dynasty clinics, like the guide or the compass to acupuncture, looking at the Genju Da Chang, the complete compendium, and the book that I translated as well, explanations of channels and points, and then we're gonna bring in these some famous 20th century acupuncturists like He Pu Ren, Li Zhen, these guys who, if you studied acupuncture in China, you would have heard about them because they're very famous and very well known. So my goal is to try and bring this information to you because I think it really is much better than a lot of the information that we have in the West. And so I want to compile this information, bring the very best of these people to you guys so that you don't have to go and read it and you don't have to do that hard work. I've done the hard work for you so that you can just learn from the best and implement these strategies from these leading clinicians into your own clinic. So, a little bit about me. I've been practicing acupuncture for over 15 years. I'm also a herbalist as well. I have translated and edited multiple Ming and Qing texts with my colleague Alan Saw as well. I translated the acupuncture book Explanations of Channels and Points. It's the only surviving commentary on acupuncture points, the complete one. And this kind of commentarial tradition was not really attempted on acupuncture points, really. Well, using the classic, because it's a commentary on the systematic classic, which was written in third century or compiled in third century, and he wrote basically a commentary on all of that. That has not ever been attempted since, so that's the only translation of that. In terms of what I like to read everything from Han Dynasty to the modern era, with a special interest in the Ming and Qing Dynasty physicians. And even what I tend to find is that people might say, "Oh, do you kind of read herbal medicine, acupuncture?" Even a lot of the what we might consider herbal doctors would talk about acupuncture as well. So they might write a little bit about the channels or write about they use some points. So the more that I read what perhaps you might argue as herbal literature, the less that I find that these two traditions were clearly delineated. I find that that these people would often kind of like dip their toes in maybe a little bit of the acupuncture tradition more than people might like to admit. Along with my colleagues Will Servals and Ivan Savala, I'm a founder of the Academy of Source-Based Medicine, and I'm also try to ascribe to what we call the Zhengbing Pi, which means the how do we say it? Kind of like the rectification and elucidation school. So we try to bring information back to the source and try to understand it. So my goal with this course is really to try to contextualize Chinese medicine, and specifically acupuncture and acupuncture channels. So these are some of the books that I've worked on as well. I'm really excited that the one on the bottom right, if you can see that, the systematic differentiation of warm diseases, hopefully that will be out soon. I'm hoping it was supposed to be out by the end of June, but there's, as with everything, there's always some delays when we're working on different things. So it's been a little bit slow, but hopefully we'll get it out by the end of what's it now? Maybe by hopefully by mid August. But the final steps are being put through now, so it's really exciting. And then other than that, I've worked on the Dungding US series and my own with Alan and working on the explanations of channels and points as well, which is the only very very unique text and commentary of the acupuncture points and names. So I thought today I would talk a little bit about some of the course details. So viewing options, it's going to be a live stream in an Australian time, 7:30 to 9:30 on a Wednesday. That's Brisbane time as well. So if you will be affected by daylight savings, please be aware of that I live in Brisbane, so this will be by my schedule. Okay. And it will be on the first and third Wednesday of every month. So we will be starting the lung and large intestine in September, October, and November. So there will be 6 classes for the 2 courses, and each class will be 2 hours. Block 2 will be the stomach and spleen, and that will be in February, March, and April. Okay. Now there will also be a recorded video. You have, if you live in Australia or a time zone that is that suits you, you can watch the live stream, but I will also be recording it and uploading it to the Academy of Source Based Medicine website, so that you don't have to watch the live video, because I know the Australian time zone is not very suitable for Europe or for America, or at that time being in the middle of the week, you guys might have to go to clinic or something like that. But I really wanted to do part of it live, or give some people an opportunity to have live education, because I really feel like in a lot of, at least in Australia, a lot of the education has all moved online, and they just record it from a distance. And even though it is online, I feel like it's important that we have some kind of communication with each other when we're doing the class as well. So the cost will be 300 USD to purchase one block, or 500 USD to purchase both blocks at the beginning. That will be the $500 price will be the early bird, and then that will go up to 550 after the early bird has finished. So I'll talk a little bit about the structure of the course. At the start, I will introduce the organ or the bowel that we're talking about, the viscera, so the lung, and we'll talk a little bit about like its form, how did the Chinese conceive of its structure, the function as well, its kind of nature or its characteristics, and some of its correspondences. And all of these will be quotes from the classics as well, so that we know directly where the information is coming from. Then I will introduce the channel as well, where we'll talk about the pathway from Ling Shu chapter 10 and a little bit of commentary if needed. We'll also discuss how some other famous physicians have looked at the channel as well, particularly we being a guy called Lu Shouyan, who was a very famous early 20th Shanghai practitioner as well. And then the majority of the course will be spent talking about points. And I've broken down the points into what I call major points, or dashui, and minor points, or xiaoshui. So, so the major points will be having a lot more discussion about them, because these are the points that we probably tend to use more in clinic. And it doesn't mean that if you use minor points more in clinic, that's fine as well. I'm not disrespecting those. I'm just saying that tends to, the major points tend to have a little bit more literature about them, and that we can discuss in depth as well. The minor points we will still discuss, but not to the extent that we will talk about the major points. Then my goal is also, should there be time, is hopefully for each channel we can kind of review an influential physician or look at an important historical text, because I really want to try and bring back the importance of understanding our tradition and how it developed, and looking at what ideas kept kind of coming through these texts, so that we can say, oh yeah, we see this idea pop up in early Song Dynasty, and then it's repeated in the Ming, the Qing, and then we see doctors in the 20th century using it as well. And we think to ourselves, this is obviously an important concept, idea, point, function, something like that we should be at least experimenting with in clinic ourselves to see if we can also replicate those results. So when I look at it, when we're talking about a study of a point, at school, you might think about, well, I learned, all there was to know about a point, at least maybe according to Deadman. But even when, sorry, manual of acupuncture, I should call it. But even when people study a manual of acupuncture, they tend to not even utilize that correctly, because I've done clinic with a lot of students, and they'll say, well, what points do I choose for this disease? And I'll say, well, look at a manual of acupuncture. It has all these disease combos, points for classical diseases, and things like that. So I've already said, sorry, what is a major reminder point? So I'm going to be really bringing in a lot more information that we haven't been exposed to. So the first thing that I'll do is I will want to talk about the name of the point as well. So hopefully we can start to understand a little bit about why is that point named what it is as well. The category of the point, if it has a relevant category. Generally, what you see is that these major points will belong to a category. And that is kind of one of the reasons why it becomes a major point. Because one important thing to know is that when we look at indications and functions, is that when we talk about acupuncture functions, like maybe like draining damp or something like that, those functions are very, very recent. What existed prior to that was function derived from category. So that this point might be like a wood point, or it might be a Jingwell point, something like that, or a front moo point, collecting point, back shoe, transporting point. Those kinds of points had categories based on their function. So in our next part, we look at indication and functions. We look at classical diseases. We look at some biomedicine diseases as well, try to understand how this point has been used and how to use it ourselves. Next, we're going to look at what I call successional literature. So we look at odes and combinations, or prescriptions, I should say. Sorry. I try to, when I talk about acupuncture combinations, I call them prescriptions. Just the way that they write about it in Chinese tends to lead to that translation. It also separates it from kind of the herbal tradition, which we call formula. So looking through these periods of time to see how did these other doctors maybe they might either highlight a new use for this point, or they might really reinforce indication for the point. So we can really start to think, oh, when I see this point or see this disease, I think of this point as well, based on this song. And that's something that I noticed a lot of literature did in Chinese, is that they would write about, or when they would quote a case study, or when they would write about a case study, they would say, oh, I chose this point because of this song or this ode. They would memorize them. So I want to try and bring that tradition back to how we practice. And also having a little bit of a look from some modern masters as well. So we look at some clinical insights, how they might be using this point to treat various diseases, what patterns might they see from some of these in these diseases, and what other points might they choose if they don't select that point to treat a pattern. And finally, we'll look at case studies, what I call like the missing link of Chinese medicine, which is going to analyze how this point is utilized in clinic. Now, for the rest of the video, I'll just give you a few examples of how I will be teaching some of the course as well. So, for example, when we look at cross-referencing the treatment of sorrow and crying, this is a common point that I use in clinic lung 5 for sorrow and crying. But we can see some other lung points, such as lung 7 also treats frequent crying. Lung 10 treats sorrow and fear. So whereas in lung 5, they often say that the sorrow and crying is due to a dryness, and you might need to kind of like moisten the lung, has this a water point. Where maybe lung 10, if you see that there's more heat there, because lung 10 is a fire point. So maybe you need to drain the fire that's invading metal to try and help that sorrow and fear. We have some other tie-in points, such as spleen 5 and spleen 7. Well, spleen 5 is the metal point as well. So there we look at a combination between tie-in of lung and metal working together. And lungs and spleen 7 is also can treat sorrow of the heart. We also have some heart points that treat sorrow and crying, such as heart 5 and heart 7 as well. So if there is more of a heart symptomology, maybe we choose those points rather than necessarily our default position, which might be to choose lung 5 or to choose lung points. So the goal here is to try and look at some points that have a symptom or similar symptomology and to try and help us decide what might be the pathomechanism behind selecting these points. For example, can look at lung 7 and lung 9 to treat cough, and this is according to He Pu Ren, and he chooses lung 7 and lung 9 at the same time to treat wind cough. How does he justify that? He quotes the Ode of the Jade Dragon, and here is the quotes. I'll translate these in the course, but due to just an introductory video, we're gonna skip through it. He adds that you can also include bladder 12, Fengmen. He says for wind heat cough, so that those ones for wind cold, but for wind heat, you could use bladder 42, and this is according to the Jinju Junan. He has other patterns that he lists, which might be for phlegm damp assailing the lung. He says you can use stomach 40, bladder 13, stomach 40, I think, being the low point, and bladder 13 being the Feishu, the lung transport. And if there's lung yin vacuity, he has some of these other points as well that you could select. And he provides his reasoning as well, which we will go into the course. Now, I had another little idea, and this is something that I've found quite unique, is that I want to try, and when we're talking about the point name, is try to give the point a little bit of imagery. So when we think about, for example, Taiyuan or Supreme Abyss, it's this idea of this kind of like water, in my opinion, running where the vessel is, it runs between these two deep cliffs as well. So I'm going to try to give you guys a little bit of visual odes or visual ideas to memorize the points as well. So I don't want to kind of give them all away. I'm using ChatGPT, but I think it does an all right job at trying to let us know what it looks like. And that way, when you think about it, you'll remember, oh, Lung 9 Taiyuan, and you can think of this picture in your mind. For me, I'm a very visual person, so this helps me a lot. So we have a little look at a case study by Li Zhen. This was the famous 20th century acupuncturist, not to be confused with the herbalist. He has the same name, different Chinese characters, but same name. So, for example, we'll look at a case study by a lady called Wang. She's 37. She came in 1970 in May, so kind of around the beginning of summer. Her main complaint was chest pain for over 15 days. This was caused due to excessive work or taxation on her body. Symptoms: pain on the left side of the chest, difficult movement, palpation on lung 1 and stomach and small intestine 13 on the back, tender. She successfully used a herbal solution called Chili San. I'm not sure what that one is, but it seems Alicia Jen has seemed to said that these herbs have then further depleted her. He says that the tongue is red and the pulse is deep and weak. So his pattern identification is taxation damage to the sinew and vessels. Channels and network vessels are now obstructed. The chi mechanism in the chest is inhibited, and this is kind of leading to pain in the shoulder and the scapula. His treatment method: free the chi and blood in the channels and network vessels. And I really like his prescription, because I think in the West, maybe some of us might use a lot of points. I tend to use more points, but he only uses 2, just lung 1 and small intestine 13, and to drain them as well. So I think this idea is, you might say, well, isn't the person deficient? But my idea here is that he's using draining as a method, draining to tonify, because if it's obstructed and there's a stagnation there, yes, the person is taxed, but you kind of need to unblock the river to allow the river to flow. And in the second session, he used has above, but bladder 45 was also drained. And that could possibly just be because that area was tender as well. He doesn't actually say why he uses that. One of my other goals is to try and bring in some older case studies as well. So a case by Yang Jizhou. He's younger. He was treating this in 1562. The younger brother suffered from heart epilepsy for several years. The elder Shutang summoned for a visit, and he said, "We must perform the Yate method opening and closing," said the official. He then needled Jiao Hai, Li Che, lung 7, kidney 6, lung 7, as well as performing moxa on bladder 15 and other points. They don't mention what other points. Sorry. He said, once the chi arrived, I performed with the needle the number of engendment and completion, which is a technique of rotation. As a result, the person or the patient recovered. He says, in general, to treat this pattern, one must discern the 5 types of epilepsy, which are recorded in detail in the chapter prior. Thus, I am not copying them here. So he talks about them earlier. But this is one of my goals, is to try and bring some earlier case studies in as well, if I can find them. They're not easy to find. I will say that. And finally, this is going to be the blocks and the points if you're interested. I won't talk about them here. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what kind of the stomach and the spleen points, the minor ones of those that will do. The major ones I think are pretty obvious for those channels. Maybe there'll be one or two that changes. If anyone really wants a point that's included that isn't on this list, then you can let me know and I can see if I can include it. So, upon completion of this course, my goal is that you will leave with a deep understanding of the most commonly used acupuncture points in clinic, an awareness of how this point functions, of how point functions were engineered from indications, and which diseases use these functions for. So this is just not, when there's damp, we just don't automatically select spleen 9. We think maybe a little bit more about it. If there's fatigue, we don't automatically select stomach 36. We still may, but we may think about other points that might be preferential or perhaps more suited to the condition. You also gain insights into how to use these acupuncture points with your own patients for commonly seen diseases with real clinical examples from modern masters, and hopefully understanding that maybe some diseases might take longer to cure than others as well. So it might take a bit of time. And you also might need to, when we look at case studies, might need to understand, hey, if I want this person to get better, maybe we need to do more frequent treatments as well. So that's something to think about. And most importantly, you get a source-based approach to using points from classical and successional acupuncture literature. And this allows you to then really follow in the footsteps of our medical ancestors and really become, in my opinion, like a true traditional Chinese medicine doctor. We're no longer just using modern texts. We're really trying to implement these ideas that have existed for the last 2,000 years. So just a quick fact and Q&A. Do you have to purchase both blocks? No. You can purchase the lung and large intestine, or when the time comes to the spleen and stomach, you can purchase that as well. Obviously, it's cheaper to purchase 2 because I would like to continue doing this for the rest of the channels and points. Hopefully every 6 months, I will aim to do a channel, a block of channels. So, the organ and the bowel, or the zong and the fu. Do you have to watch the live stream? No, you can watch it on the website as well. Now, the next one is a big one. Are there CEUs? I'm currently in the process of organizing that, and I will hopefully have an answer for you in the next month or two. I'm fingers crossed that we can get that. How long do I have access to the course? I would say at this stage, at least 2 years. Perhaps longer, depending on what we can do with the website. And I've already said, will I do other channels and points? Yes, my goal is after I finish these 4 to then do the bladder, small intestine, heart, and kidney as well. So that, and then after that, obviously, the last 4, the pericardium, sanjiao, liver, and gallbladder, and then hopefully the ren and the do as well. So it was kind of like a multi-year project, but I think it'll be quite interesting. Finally, there's the link to the course down below. I hope to see you there. I'm really excited about this course. There's nothing else like it in English, in my opinion. I've spent a lot of time reading and researching acupuncture literature, and I really want to bring to you guys the best information out there because, in my opinion, when a Chinese medicine practitioner performs well, we all benefit. When a Chinese medicine practitioner does not perform well, then we also all suffer. So if we can try and elevate the practice of everyone around us, then our profession will be better for it. So I hope to see you there. Welcome to ask any questions by my email. And yeah, I think it'll be a really good course. Thank you very much for watching this video.